Chapter 6. The Witch. The life-size puppet had come out of the stage door entrance. It was dressed in a frilly ballet costume, and the blonde hair was curly and close-cropped. One thing is certain, Nancy told herself. This is a puppet, not a live person. Mr. Spencer whispered, "Now is our chance to catch that thing." He began to run toward the mysterious figure. Nancy followed and caught up to him. But before they had gone far, the dancing puppet jerked around suddenly and returned inside the door, which slammed shut. When Nancy and the actor reached it, they found the door locked. Mr. Spencer looked at her. "You see what I mean?" he cried excitedly. "It's supernatural. I tell you, this is a ghost with a brain." "It certainly seems so," Nancy agreed. "How can we get into the theater?" Mr. Spencer said they would need a key, but he had none with him. "I'll hurry to the house and get one," he said. "Are you afraid to wait here alone?" Nancy smiled. "Of course not, but do hurry." The actor sped off across the lawn and into the kitchen. He was gone so long that Nancy felt precious time was being lost. Finally, Mr. Spencer returned and unlocked the stage door entrance. It was pitch dark inside. He snapped on the lights. "Now, where did that puppet go?" he asked, looking all around but seeing no sign of it. "How many other doors are there?" Nancy asked. "The only other one is the main entrance," Mr. Spencer told her. They walked through the theater to inspect it. "Locked," Mr. Spencer said, "and bolted from the inside." "Then no one came out this way," Nancy said thoughtfully. "And there are no windows. The theater is air-conditioned. Let's make a thorough search," she proposed. Nancy and Mr. Spencer looked in and behind every seat in the theater, back of all scenery and in closets. The puppet was not there. Nancy was extremely puzzled. Aloud, she said, "If I weren't so practical, I'd think that dancing figure evaporated into thin air." "Well," Mr. Spencer said, "we've lost our chance for tonight, I guess. We may as well go back to the house." On the way, he added, "I'm glad you saw the dancing puppet, Nancy. You know now that it wasn't a figment of my imagination." Nancy asked him if the strange apparition had ever caused any damage. "No," Mr. Spencer replied. "I can't say it has. What worries me most is that the story will leak out and people will be afraid to come to our performances." "A few might," Nancy answered, "but a good many people might come out of curiosity. However, the only times you've seen the dancing puppet are late at night. Isn't that true?" "Yes." "Then, if I had to guess why the puppet is here," Nancy said, "I'd say it's to scare you and your wife and Mr. Calhoun away from the property." As she prepared for bed, Nancy kept mulling this thought over in her mind. It was evident that somebody was back of the strange performance. But what was the reason? And why should anyone want to frighten people out of the house? Was there something hidden in the house? The following morning, Nancy told Bess and George of her strange adventure and suggested that the three girls go back to the stage and hunt for a secret entrance to the attached barn. "You figure that's the only way the puppet could have been hidden from you?" George asked. "Yes." By 10 o'clock, Nancy and the cousins were standing on the empty stage, gazing at the rear wall. Seeing no opening, they began shifting scenery to take a look, but they found no door or sliding panel. "Maybe there's an opening up higher," George suggested. "There might have been a ladder to it, which has been removed. One of the props for the current Civil War play was an old farm wagon. George climbed up into it and gazed above her head. Suddenly she called, "I think I've found the door!" The other girls climbed into the wagon and confirmed George's finding. Above them was indeed a door with an inconspicuous handle. "You think the person with the puppet went through there?" Bess asked. "How could anybody? We can't even reach it from here." Nancy suggested that the person might have had an accomplice to help him. By standing in the hands of one man, the other, holding the puppet, could have been lifted up to the door. "Let's try that," she proposed. She made a cup of her hands and lifted George high. George reached the door and opened it. "Goes into the haymow," she told the others. She pulled herself up into it. A moment later, she said, "Here's the answer. A ladder!" She lowered it to the floor of the stage, and Nancy and Bess climbed up nimbly to join her. "Let's pull the ladder up and put it where George found it," Nancy proposed. "We don't want to leave any trace of our having been here." She and Bess hauled up the ladder, then Bess swung the door shut. The girls gazed around but saw no one. The puppet was not in evidence. "It's my guess the person escaped out of this barn and went off with the puppet," Bess spoke up. "You could be right," Nancy agreed. Then she added in a whisper, "But the puppet may be hidden here. Before we look, we'd better make sure no one's around." While Bess and George walked to the edge of the haymow and looked down, Nancy went back to see that the door to the stage was tightly closed. Suddenly, the girls heard a deep voice intoning on the stage. The three stood electrified. The next moment, they recognized the voice as that of Emmett Calhoun. Nancy opened the door as the actor began to quote from Shakespeare's King Richard III. "My conscience hath 1,000 several tongues, and every tongue brings in a several tale, and every tale condemns me for a villain." Bess grabbed Nancy's arm. "He's the one," she said. "His conscience is bothering him, and he's trying to get rid of his feeling this way." "Shh," George warned, as Callie, old boy, went on. "Oh, what may man within him hide, though angel on the outward side?" Emmett Calhoun did not recite any more. He gazed around the stage, then went outside. "Wasn't that something?" George said, chuckling. Bess did not smile. "That's from Measure for Measure," she murmured. She looked at Nancy and asked, "Do you think he's involved in this mystery?" "It's a possibility," Nancy answered. "He is a strange person," she said. George suggested that the mystery might be some kind of a joke. Bess gave her a withering look. "Joke? Nancy gets knocked on the head and somebody runs into her car?" Nancy agreed with Bess. "One thing's sure," she said. "We'll need a lot more clues before we can decide anything." The girls made sure no one was hiding in the hay barn. Then they began their hunt for the mysterious dancing puppet. "Let's each take a section of the hay," Nancy proposed. Bess and George chose the two far sides, while Nancy remained in the center. The three girls were silent as they scuffed through the loose hay and parted it with their hands. About 5 minutes later, Nancy's foot kicked against a hard object. "Something's here!" she sang out. The other girls rushed to her side, and together they unearthed the hidden object. "Another puppet!" Nancy exclaimed in amazement. "Bess, will you go stand near the ladder and tell me if anyone comes into the barn? Nobody must know that we found this." As Bess moved several feet away from the others, Nancy held up the life-size puppet. It was dressed in traditional witch clothes. "Who on earth hid this?" George cried out. The others could not answer her. Nancy instantly recalled the telephone call she had received on the day of their arrival, when the high-pitched, witch-like voice had claimed to be the dancing puppet. Now she wondered if the person who had called was the owner of this witch, as well as the dancing puppet. Aloud, Nancy said, "I believe we've discovered the hiding place for the ballet puppet, but we've come too late to find it." George had a sudden idea and rushed to the spot where the chest of cannonballs had been buried. They were gone! The girls looked at one another. "Now what?" Bess asked. End of chapter 6.